All right. Good evening, everyone. So I'm coming from you from the state of Virginia right now, and as anybody in Virginia who's paying attention to the news would tell you, Governor Northam has decided to issue a stay-at-home order for the state until June 10th, I believe. Um, Governor Hogan in Maryland has issued a similar order, but has given no timeline. So it's just stay at home until we say you can come out. So there's that. Virginia, Maryland, at least we know it's June 10th until they move the date back. Anyway, um, I've been cooped up in this place now for almost 8 days. So I figured, why not make a video about something? And this just kind of came to my attention. So a lot of chatter's been going on online, especially. Are these stay-at-home orders just kind of like the precursor to martial law? And what would happen if this country went under martial law? And is what we're dealing with as far as the illness worse than losing our liberties? So I decided to kind of war game it out, so to speak, in how it would play out logistically. So what are the odds? So we have here, and this is just raw numbers. I mean, you could probably come up with different figures depending on what you look up. This is just what I found with, straight up Google search. Civilian households, 50 million civilian households have one or more firearms in them. This could be a household of one, this could be a household of two, this could be a household of 20 people. But what the figures show, about 50 million households have at least one firearm in that household. Military, active duty and reserve. We have 1,380,895 active and reserve military. This puts us the number three largest military in the world. Makes sense. We're a pretty big country. We have a proud military history. We have the best military in the world, no doubt about that. But obviously, we're not, the largest country as population goes. So China, by the way, thanks China for everything. China probably has a bigger military with more people, perhaps India as well. Don't quote me on that, but we have the number three. Federal law enforcement officers. We have 118,650. That's a 2013 figure, so I'm sure this is probably a little low by 2020 standards. So you could bump that, to 120, but we'll go with 118,650 for now. State and local Leo. This is a roundabout figure, but the estimate is around 701,000 sworn state and local law enforcement officers. That means gun carriers. Okay, so what are all these numbers? Like, what's the significance of them? Well, if we take a ratio here, we got 50 million households, x 2.2 million with these three figures added. You have a ratio of 23 to 1. What does that mean? Well, that means that if these figures represented people and these figures represented people, and the blue went up against the red, the blue would have a fight of one guy for every 23 guys. Now, in terms of a street fight, people usually say, okay, man to man, one-on-one, that's even odds, right? 2 against 1, if you know what you're doing, if you're competent, in how to fight, you could probably walk away from that one. You're going to take your licks for sure. A 3-to-1 fight, and you're going to get your clock cleaned, like pretty bad. A 23-to-1 fight, they have to ID your teeth. 23-to-1, those are crazy odds. Okay, so just that alone tells you right there what martial law would look like long term for these folks. And I mean every single one of them stacked up against every single one of these. 23 people to worry about for one person. Okay. But there's an X factor, and I wrote this down too. 18 million. What does that mean? That figure represents combat vets. Not veterinarians, of course, combat veterans. In America, we have 18 million combat vets, give or take. They're, of course, probably included in this figure here. But I know what you're saying. You're saying, well, yeah, you've got this and you've got these, but these people are trained. These people in the military, Fed, and state and local LEO, those guys, they live a lifestyle of law enforcement. They're used to handling guns. They qualify with guns. It's part of their job. I get that. But in a martial law scenario, you're no longer talking about a job for some people. That's going to be a way of life for those people. So it's going to become more important than their job. It's going to become what they have to deal with every day. Now, these guys, the combat vets, let's say you throw them in the mix, that's 3 to 1. So for 50 million to 18, roughly 3 to 1, that's one of these guys training 3 of these guys. That's doable. 23 against 1, that's not doable, okay? But 3 people getting training from 1 person, 100% doable. Now let's just say that 18 million is too high, that these 18 million combat vets, some of them are Vietnam War era, even Korean War or World War II, entering their late 80s, 90s. Let's say only 9 million of them would be considered quote unquote combat effective, meaning they could serve in some role as far as combat's concerned still. 9 million, that's still 6 to 1. 6 people getting training from 1 person, that's a very small classroom. 3 to 1, I mean, yeah, that's ideal, but 6 to 1 still easily doable. And you better believe that a combat vet who bled for this country would be ready, willing, and able to teach his fellow citizen how to fight if he woke up one day and saw tanks rolling down his street after years of him having to fight overseas, seeing the same thing. He's going to be pretty pissed. You could rely on a lot of these people, maybe not even 9 million, maybe 6 million, maybe 5 million. They're going to show these people what to do and how to do it. If these people all line up against them, that's going to happen, okay? So what's the gist of this? We've never seen full-scale martial law in the United States. And I think because of these figures, you never really will. And that's the beauty of this country, is that the men who were at the beginning saw this potentially coming down the pike and said, we can't be here to tell these people what to do the way we did it, to liberate ourselves from tyranny. We just have to give them something that will enable them to find that spirit, and they'll have the resources to make that will happen. And that's the Second Amendment. I mean, if you really want to get down to it, 50 million households have 1 firearm, at least 1 firearm in them. That's great. That number should be 100 million at least. That's where we should be. But regardless, this is what we have right now. 23 to 1 odds, 18 million combat vets, 3 to 1 to train, 23 to 1 to fight. If the American people really wanted martial law to stop, it would stop. Tanks rolling down the streets, planes flying overhead. Forget about the amount of desertion you would probably have in these numbers. You're going to have a lot of desertion in the state and local LEO, by the way. These people aren't going to be knocking on their neighbors' doors every day to make sure they're complying with the federal martial law. The Fed LEOs, they're going to live in communities too. You're going to see big-time desertion there. Military, they'll get deployed all over the place, but a lot of these guys are kids, you know, whether they're 18, 20 years old, in that range. They're not going to want to put a gun in mom and pop's face and tell them to get inside because the government said so. So I'm not saying that martial law is one of those things that is impractical for the federal government at a micro level. But at a macro level, you will never see it in America, because I think if enough people from this figure got it in their heads that they no longer wanted to put up with it, it would end. So we're just gonna have to deal with things as they come in the next few days, weeks, and months. As far as martial law goes, you know, that's what I came up with this. Feel free to disagree in the comments. I might just make this hobby into a channel, just because I like to think about this stuff and just kind of, you know, wax poetic and philosophic on it. Anyway, exercise your Second Amendment right, though. If you don't exercise liberties, they will be taken away eventually. Because if you're not using it, what good is it to you? That's how the government will see it. That's how anybody who gives you something will see it. If they see you not using it, that must mean you don't want it. We do want these things for this reason. Okay, take it easy.